about some of these cuts, that we are affecting the lives of literally millions of good Americans who try to keep the functions of this government working on an efficient, honest, and ethical basis day in and day out. So that, Mr. President, I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Kaka.
from Oklahoma is recognized.
I asked the quorum call not. I'm sorry.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President,
The Majority Leader is recognized.
I ask consent to call the quorum be terminated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I have 12 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session. They have the approval of Senator McConnell and of me. I would ask consent that these requests be agreed to and printed in the record.
Without objection. Morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of S-782, which the clerk will report.
Calendar number 38, S-782, a bill to amend the Public Works and Economic Development Act of 1965 to reauthorize that act and for other purposes.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader.
if I call for regular order, which I am, that means the Snow Amendment would be pending. Is that right?
The amendment is now pending.
Okay. Mr. President, first of all, I appreciate the cooperation of Senator Snowe, Senator Coburn, and others. It's important we move along with this legislation. So for the next 3 hours, we'll be able to debate the Snowe Amendment. The time will be equally divided during that period of time. We have a number of amendments that others want to offer. We already have 4 in addition to hers that have been offered. We have time agreements on those. So I appreciate everyone's help in moving forward in this regard. So, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that time until 2:15 be equally divided between Senator Snowe and Boxer, or the designees. That at 2:15 the Senate proceed to vote in relation to the Snowe Amendment, that no amendments, points of order, or motions be in order to the Snowe Amendment prior to the vote other than a budget point of order, and that the applicable motions to waive, the amendment not be divisible, that the amendment be subject to a 60-vote threshold, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table. I would also say before the chair rules on this that we have Senator McCaskill that wants to offer an amendment on the same subject matter. We'll do that at some subsequent time.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President.
Senator from California is recognized.
Mr. President, as I understand it, I will have an hour and a half to present our side on the amendment, and Senator Snowe will have an hour and a half.
Actually, a little more than that. We're going to 2:15.
Could you please give me the exact time frames here?
Under the order, an hour and 37 minutes for each side.
Thank you very much. I was close. I just wanted to let Senator Snowe know what my plan is at this time, and it is first, I'm going to yield some time on another subject, but will be used on our time to Senator Whitehouse, who has something very important pertaining to his state. And then I'm going to come back and take as much time as I might consume, and it won't be that long. I want to lay out where we are in this debate, why this bill is so important, and I'm going to make some remarks about Senator Snowe's amendment. So I don't know exactly how long it would take, but I will do it as quickly as I can and retain the balance. But at this time, I would yield 10 minutes of my time to Senator Whitehouse. Senator Whitehouse is coming back with his charts, and I reiterate I would yield the first 10 minutes of my time to Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Senator Boxer.
The senator from Rhode Island is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. My time in this chamber often gives me cause to reflect on our history and on the brave patriots who went before us, many of whom risked or even gave their lives to create this great republic. And today I'd like to talk about a group of men who 239 years ago tonight engaged in a daring act of defiance against the British Crown. For many of us, the Boston Tea Party is one of the first events we hear about in school on the road to our American Revolution. Growing up, we were taught the story of painted-up Bostonians dumping shipments of tea into Boston Harbor to defend the principle, no taxation without representation. Conspicuously missing from history books is the story of the brave Rhode Islanders who challenged the British Crown far more aggressively more than a year before Bostonians dumped those tea bags into Boston Harbor. Today, on its anniversary, I would like to take us back to an earlier milestone in America's fight for independence and to share with you the story of a British vessel, the HMS Gaspee, and to introduce to some little-known heroes now lost in the footnotes of history. In 1772, amidst growing tensions with American colonies, King George III stationed his revenue cutter, the HMS Gaspee, in Rhode Island. The Gaspee's task was to prevent smuggling and enforce the payment of taxes. But to Rhode Islanders, the vessel was a symbol of oppression. The offensive presence of the Gaspee was matched by the offensive manner of its captain, Lieutenant William Duddingston. Lieutenant Duddingston was known for destroying fishing vessels and confiscating their contents, flagging down ships, only to harass, humiliate, and interrogate sailors. But on June 9th, 1772, an audacious Rhode Islander, Captain Benjamin Lindsay, took a stand. Aboard his ship, the Hannah, Captain Lindsay set sail from Newport to Providence. On his way, he was hailed by the Gaspee to stop for a search. The defiant captain ignored the command and continued on his course. Recently, Dr. Kathy Abbas, director of the Rhode Island Marine Archaeology Project, has suggested a motivating factor for Duddingston to want to have seized the Hannah. She may have been carrying 250 pounds sterling on board. As Dr. Abbas told the Providence Journal, that was an enormous sum in those days. In any event, Captain Lindsay and his Hannah sought to evade the Gaspee. Gunshots were fired and the Hannah sped north up Narragansett Bay, with the Gaspee chasing behind in pursuit. Outsized and outgunned, Captain Lindsay drew courage and confidence from his familiarity with Rhode Island waters. He led the Gaspee into the shallow waters off Namquid Point, where the smaller Hannah cruised safely over the sandbanks. The heavier Gaspee ran aground and stuck. The Gaspee was stranded in a falling tide, and it would be many hours before high tide would lift her free. Arriving triumphantly in Providence, Captain Lindsay visited John Brown, whose family helped found Brown University. The two men rallied a group of patriots at Sabin's Tavern in what is now the east side of Providence. The Gaspee was despised by Rhode Islanders who had been too often bullied in their own waters by this ship, and the stranding of this once powerful vessel presented an irresistible chance. On that dark night, 60 men in longboats, led by Captain Lindsay and another great figure from Rhode Island Revolutionary history, Abraham Whipple, moved quietly down Narragansett Bay. They encircled the Gaspee and demanded that Lieutenant Duddingston surrender the ship. Duddingston refused and instead ordered his men to fire upon anyone who tried to board. The determined Rhode Islanders took this as a cue to force their way onto the Gaspee, and they boarded her in a raging uproar of shouted oaths, gunshots, powder smoke, and clashing swords. Amidst this violent struggle, Lieutenant Duddingston was shot by a musket ball. Right there, in the waters of Warwick, Rhode Island, the very first blood of what was to become the American Revolution was drawn. Victory was soon in the hands of the Rhode Islanders. Brown and Whipple took the captive Englishmen back to shore. You can go today down behind O'Rourke's Bar and Grill in Patuxent Village down Peck Lane towards the water, and you can see the bronze plaque there commemorating the spot where the captured crew was brought ashore. The Rhode Island Patriots then returned to set the abandoned Gaspee on fire and rid Narragansett Bay of this nuisance for once and for all. As the Gaspee burned, the fire reached her powder magazine, and she exploded like fireworks. The boom echoed across the bay through the night as the remains of the ship splashed down into the water. The Gaspee was gone, captured, burned, and blown to bits. The site of this historic victory is now named Gaspee Point. The wounding of Lieutenant Duddingston and the capture and destruction of the Gaspee occurred 16 months before the so-called Boston Tea Party. Perhaps this bold undertaking will one day show up in our history books, alongside pictures of the blazing Gaspee lighting up Narragansett Bay. Perhaps American children will one day memorize the dates of June 9th and June 10th, the night in which Benjamin Lindsay, Abraham Whipple, and John Brown led this violent attack on British rule. I do know that these events will never be forgotten in Rhode Island. Over the years, I've often had the occasion to march in the annual Gaspee Days parade in Warwick, Rhode Island, as every year we recall the courage and zeal of these men who risked it all to defend the freedoms that we enjoy today and who drew the first blood in what then became the revolutionary conflict. I thank the chair, and I'd add only that in the context of fires and disasters, we have lost one of the signature buildings of Woonsocket, Rhode Island last night. It was called the Woonsocket Rubber Company. The building was known as the Alice Mills, named after the mother of the president of the company who built it. It had existed for, I don't know, 100 years or more, and it burned in a fire so great that 12 municipal fire departments had to answer it last night. Fire departments all the way from Wrentham, Massachusetts, down to Warren, Rhode Island. And I want to express my sympathies to the people of Woonsocket on this loss and my pride in the firefighters who responded from so far and wide to attend to this fire. Unfortunately, the mill could not be saved. These mills are very hard to prevent fires in once they get burning, and we've lost something very precious in Rhode Island. And I just wanted to note that in addition to my remarks about the Gaspee. Let me thank very much my chairman on the Environment Public Works Committee. I know she has important business on the floor, and it was very kind of her to give me these few minutes to talk about this historic day in Rhode Island and American history. Thank you, Chairman Boxer. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from California is recognized.
Mr. President, I just want to thank my colleague for his remarks, and I offer my deepest sympathies to those impacted by that terrible fire. Unfortunately, in this country, we are witnessing so many disasters. It's so difficult for the people to deal with this, but we have to always respond, and I'm glad that he paid tribute to the firefighters, the first responders, because they're the ones who put everything on the line to help us. Well, Mr. President, we have before us a bill called the Economic Development Revitalization Act of 2011. It's S-782. It is a good bill. It is a bill that is needed for our times because it is a bill that is focused really on one thing, jobs. And when you ask people what our focus should be, and we all know we need to reduce the deficit and the debt, they all say number one is jobs, because without jobs, deficits only get worse, debts only get worse, as people have to turn for their very survival to the safety net that is provided in this great nation. So when we have an opportunity to come together across party lines with a jobs bill, you would think we would be delighted to do it. Now, this EDA, the Economic Development Administration, was reauthorized back in '04 when George W. Bush was president. And let me tell you a story, because everybody came together, and that EDA reauthorization passed by voice vote and was signed into law by President George W. Bush. So it is a bit perplexing for me to note that we have dozens and dozens of amendments that are absolutely non-germane to this reauthorization. We have one amendment that is pending. My colleague Senator Snowe is offering, which has never had a hearing, it has never had a markup, and it is absolutely going to change the way we can protect our people from pollution, from danger, and I think it is unfortunate that rather than work on this together, we are seeing this offered as an amendment. It is Senator Snow's complete right to do this. I respect it and I honor it and I understand how strongly she feels. But I feel just as strongly that something that would ignore public health and safety and not even put that in the benefits column is something that's a danger to the people that we serve. So we're going to have a debate about it, and the votes will come at 2, and I'm pleased that we will get to vote on this. And I do hope at some point we'll be able to look at regulatory flexibility. We'll be able to work to make sure that as we assist our businesses, and we all want to do that, that's what this bill, the EDA bill, does. It's assisting business. It's jump-starting business development, and we have example after example of that. We also can work to ease their burden a bit while not endangering the life and the health of the people. That's pretty straightforward, and I would be very happy to work with my colleague on that, but this bill has never even had a hearing. This bill she's offering has never been marked up, and I've had no opportunity other than this one to basically say how I feel. And I know it's in contrast to the way Senator Snowe feels and Senator Coburn. I have lots of respect for them. I hope they have respect for me as the chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee, because my view is my obligation is to protect the health and the safety of our kids. How many kids have asthma? If I asked a group here, I bet a third of the hands would go up. If I asked how many people know someone with asthma, I bet more than half would raise their hands. So we can't willy-nilly just support, I think, an approach that would take away the ability to put the benefits of protecting health into any formulas before we say regulations should be thrown overboard. And I think there are ways to definitely work together on this. Unfortunately, today, we're going to have an up or down vote on the Snowe amendment without that opportunity. But I want to go through the fact that the bill that is before us, the underlying bill, S-782, has strong bipartisan support. It was reported out of our EPW committee by voice vote, only one objection. And that's because this EDA has operated for 50 years. It has a very good tradition of creating jobs and spurring growth in economically hard-hit communities nationwide. And this bill is going to ensure that EDA can continue to create jobs, thousands of jobs, protect existing jobs, and drive local economic growth. And, you know, it is distressing to me to see, for example, an amendment by Senator DeMint. He's very proud of his amendment. What would it do? It would do away with the EDA. So on a bill to reauthorize the EDA, he has an amendment to eliminate the Economic Development Administration. Now, again, I respect his view, but I don't understand it. Why don't I understand it, Mr. President? Because in 2005, Senator DeMint sent out a press release congratulating local leaders for securing an EDA grant for the city of Dillon, South Carolina. So you have Senator DeMint proposing to eliminate an agency which he lauded, not once but more than once. Senator DeMint was quoted in the press release saying, quote, "This investment in Dillon County will save and create hundreds of South Carolina jobs, and I am pleased that the EDA has awarded these funds." So what planet are we on? We have a senator who sends out a press release lauding an agency that he now wants to eliminate. So you'd say, well, maybe that was 05 and he suddenly changed his mind. No. 1 year ago, Senator DeMint's staff held a workshop in Myrtle Beach to highlight competitive funding opportunities available to local communities and businesses through EDA and other federal agencies. June 16, 2010, here it is. Workshop to highlight competitive funding opportunities. The Office of U.S. Senator Jim DeMint and the Myrtle Beach Chamber of Commerce will provide a workshop, and it goes on. The EDA will be there, and staff of Senator DeMint. So I don't get what's going on. How do you send out press release lauding an agency and then say, let's do away with it? I don't get it. If jobs are our #1 priority, Mr. President, and I certainly know that you are fighting 24/7 for jobs, you're fighting against outsourcing jobs, you're fighting for job creation. The EDA, for every dollar that we spend, federal money attracts $7 of private investment. And I'm going to go through those right now with you. Again, historically, $1 of EDA investment attracts nearly $7 in private sector investment. Now you say, well, for our investment with federal dollars, how much does it cost for us to create one good job? The answer comes back. EDA creates one job for every $2,000 to $4,600 invested. That is a good investment. EDA is a job creator. That's why it is perplexing to me to have to face a host of amendments that are distracting us from jobs, jobs, jobs. Mr. President, between 2005 and 2010, with investment of $2.4 billion, total jobs generated 450,000, total jobs saved 85,000. At the $500 million funding level authorized, EDA, if that funding was spent, EDA would create 87,000 to 200,000 jobs every year, 400,000 to 1 million jobs over the life of the bill. Now, we don't know that that $500 million will stay, but historically that's what we've authorized EDA at. Here are the people who are supporting an authorization of the EDA. The United States Conference of Mayors, the American Public Works Association, the National Association of Counties, the AFL-CIO, the American Planning Association, the Association of University Research Parks, the Educational Association of University Centers, the Economic Development Council, the Association of Development Organizations, the National Business Incubation Association, State Science and Technology Institute, University Economic Development Association, National Association of Regional Councils, and we got a letter from an arm of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce lauding this program and citing how well they work with the EDA. They say, we are the citizenship arm of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and in this capacity, we work with thousands of business and local chambers of commerce on community development and disaster recovery. These local chambers and businesses are constantly looking for national best practices, lessons learned, technical assistance, strategy support, and other insights, tools, and techniques to make communities as competitive as possible. And here's what they closed. This is the Chamber of Commerce arm. As you consider EDA's future roles and responsibilities, we'd be happy to share with you our experiences and lessons learned in working with the agency and provide you with additional information. They talk about the unique capability the EDA can and does support. They say EDA staff members have displayed a high degree of professionalism and technical expertise. They've engaged with us on multiple levels, from consultations to sharing valuable field experience at the state and national level, state and local level. So we have tremendous support. The AFL-CIO dealing with the loss of construction jobs says EDA has established an admirable track record in assisting economically troubled low-income communities with limited job opportunities by putting their investments to good use in promoting needed job creation and industrial and commercial development. And I would say the last chart, American Public Works Association, they build the public works. They build the water systems, the sewer systems we need. This is a letter from Peter King, Executive Director of American Public Works Association, dated this month. I write on behalf of the 29,000 members of APWA in support of the Economic Development Revitalization Act S-782. We urge the Senate to pass this legislation, which will create jobs, stimulate economic growth in distressed areas, improve the economic growth of local communities. So I would say this. After Senator Snowe speaks and others speak, I will reserve my balance of time to go into specifically what programs we have seen flourish because of that little spark that gets lit when EDA gets in there. The private sector loves this program. Local government, state government loves it. It's worked since 1965, and I would urge my colleagues, if you have amendments, let's get time agreements. Let's dispose of those amendments. Let's get to a final vote on this very important program, which has flourished under Democratic presidents, Republican presidents, Democratic Congresses, Republican Congresses. For goodness sakes, does everything have to be a fight royale around here? We ought to be able to reach across the aisle when there is a bill brought up that deals with jobs. And if we don't do that, we fail the people. We honestly fail the people. My very last point, Senator Inhofe worked very hard on this bill, and Republicans have added a lot of reforms to the EDA. I think those reforms are very important. One of them would eliminate duplication of effort. Others would give the private sector the ability to buy out the EDA's interest. So I think clearly, at this time, we should get these amendments done. I'm pleased that Senator Snowe has agreed to a vote. I know she's anxious to speak, and I would conclude at this time and reserve the balance of my time and ask how much time is remaining on my side.
76 minutes remaining.
Thank you very much. Yield the floor.
President.
The senior senator from Maine is recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. And before I begin to address the pending amendment that I have offered along with a number of senators in response to regulatory reform, I'm going to recognize the senator from North Dakota who is a co-sponsor of this legislation, and I'm delighted that he is. He recognizes and acknowledges the import of changing the regulatory environment in America today if we're going to have job creation and economic growth.
Thank you. Senator Snowe, I'm pleased to be here.
The junior senator from North Dakota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Snowe, I'm pleased to be here with you and to rise in support of your legislation, the Freedom Act of 2011. I'll be brief in my comments. I know you have comments to make. Also, I appreciate Senator Boxer's comments in regard to Republicans and Democrats coming together on this legislation, and I think that's exactly what needs to happen with the Snowe-Coburn Amendment, the Freedom Act of 2011. I'm very pleased to be a co-sponsor of this legislation, and I draw on 10 years of experience as a governor in our state in expressing how very important it is that we create the kind of legal tax and regulatory structure at the federal level that will help us to stimulate private investment and get this economy going and growing and get people back to work. And I know, Senator, that is exactly what you hope to achieve with this amendment, and you will, and that's why we need to pass it. You know, just this morning, jobless claims came out, and they were higher, new jobless claims were higher than anticipated, 427,000. Last week, we got the employment numbers. We gained only 54,000 jobs. and unemployment is 9.1%. At the same time, we face a more than $14 trillion debt. Our deficit, more than $1.5 trillion. We're spending $3.7 trillion a year and only taking in $2.2 trillion in revenue. Now, clearly, we need to get a grip on spending, but to get out of this deficit and debt and to get people back to work, we need to get this economy growing. And that doesn't mean the federal government spending more. It means the federal government spending less and creating the kind of pro-growth, jobs-oriented economy, legal tax and regulatory structure that will help us grow. And if you look back at the decade of the 90s when we had a deficit, and even before when we had stagflation, it was a combination. It was a combination of a growing economy and better fiscal management that got people back to work, got us out of the deficit, and got us to a surplus. We need to do that again. We need this kind of legislation that will help us create a regulatory environment that stimulates business investment, creates jobs, gets people back to work, gets a growing economy, and then with good fiscal restraint will help us get on top of this incredible, this huge deficit and our debt. It's vitally important for us now. It's vitally important for future generations. This is an important step in the right direction. I'm pleased to co-sponsor this legislation with you. Thank you for bringing it forward, and I look forward to hearing your remarks very much. And I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Maine is recognized.
Thank you. And I want to thank the senator from North Dakota, Senator Hoeven, for his excellent remarks. He understands, as a former governor for 10 years, the impact of regulations on small businesses and how detrimental they can be to job creation. And particularly at this time where we have a very difficult economy, we have persistently high unemployment, we have subpar economic growth, we are at a consequential moment in our economic history, frankly, Mr. President, that deserves the attention of the United States Senate on this particular issue. So I want to thank the Senator for his comments in recognizing the effects that regulatory reform will have on the performance of small business and ultimately job creation in this economy. Mr. President, I'm very pleased to have so many of my colleagues co-sponsoring this amendment, and I'm pleased as well to have worked with Senator from Oklahoma, Senator Coburn, and has been co-sponsored by Senators McConnell, Ayotte, Barrasso, Senator Brown, Senator Coates, Senator Enzi, Senator Isaacson, Senator Kirk, Senator Hoeven, and Senator Johnson, Senator Moran, Senator Soon, and Senator Vitter. It's clear to me that many of the senators understand the value and the imperative of reforming our regulatory system. It's absolutely vital that the federal government considers the small business economic impact of the rules and regulations that the agencies are promulgating. Now, the question might be asked, why do we need regulatory reform? I keep hearing this. You know, we had a bill on the floor last month, early May, in which I was denied a vote on this amendment, which was regrettable because it's clear that many people don't understand how important this is and how central it is to small business job creation, how vital it is to the survival of small businesses and the cost of doing business across America. And that's what I keep hearing. So I keep hearing about, well, yes, we understand it's important, however, or but, or at some point. Let's define at some point when. So when I was denied a vote on May 4th here in the United States Senate on the small business bill on regulatory reform, I heard we were going to have hearings on the issue. Well, that obviously hasn't occurred. So it becomes the politics of obfuscation. It's not the reality. As one of my small businesses said yesterday, he said, you know, it's like when you come into Washington, it's a walled city, walled off from reality, detached from the real world on Main Street. So I keep hearing, oh, we're going to have hearings. Well, we haven't had hearings. We did have a hearing in the Small Business Committee on regulatory reform, but that's obviously not enough. It doesn't suit the senator from California, saying, well, you know, we haven't had hearings. Well, I know she's offered plenty of amendments on the floor of the United States Senate that hasn't had hearings. We had a major issue yesterday that was very important to small business, the interchange fee. That didn't have hearings. It didn't have hearings the first time it was offered to the Dodd-Frank legislation last year, and yesterday's amendment didn't have a hearing. So it's a new standard when it comes to regulatory reform. It's a new standard when it comes to the amendment that I have offered consistently. It's been sitting out there. Do you think there have been any overtures by anybody on the other side of the aisle to say, you know, we need to work on it right away? We get it. Something's happening on Main Street in America. And what's happening on Main Street in America is that we're not creating jobs. We are not creating jobs. Why? Because of what is not happening here in Washington and the United States Senate. There is a clear detachment from the real world. People keep asking me, small businesses, what's going on? I said I can't explain it, other than it's clear that people don't understand what's going on. Because if they did, we'd be sitting down talking about it. Now, I heard the senator from California say at some point, that's it, this ambiguity. But talk about the person who's running a small business, trying to keep his neck or her neck above water to keep their business afloat during these very difficult times. And what do they talk about? They talk about the regulations that's suffocating their ability to survive in this very tough economic climate. We're dithering. That's what this is all about. It's all a masquerade. It's a facade, just bringing up some bogus arguments. I have been in the legislative process for the better part of 4 decades. I know when there's a serious purpose about working together and solving a problem. There is no interest in solving this problem. Everybody's got their own agendas. But when people wondering why there is this unemployment rate, 9.1%, 9.1%. When I raised the concerns to the Secretary of the Treasury back in early February in the Finance Committee, when he was testifying, I described the concerns about what was happening on Main Street, because I take Main Street tours. I invite people to do that and to actually listen to what people are saying. And he said, I think your view of the economy is dark and pessimistic. I said, well, maybe I wasn't hearing it right. Maybe I wasn't hearing it right on Main Street. So when I meet with my small businesses, I mention that to them, and you know what they say? They laugh. They can't believe it. That people don't understand, that the Secretary of Treasury doesn't see what's going on Main Street. The administration doesn't. The United States Senate doesn't. The U.S. Congress doesn't. Because if you did, we'd be working here day and night. I was told I had to have a vote on this amendment right now. Why? Because it's Thursday. We're smelling the fumes. And while people are suffering on Main Street, they're losing their jobs. Have you heard the stories about what people are facing? They're desperate. Time and time again, I hear the same old refrains. We don't have time. We got to rush it. It hasn't had hearings. We'll do it sometime. Will you tell that to the average American who's struggling to keep a job, find a job, or to keep the doors open to their business? That's what this is all about. That's the reality. Now, we can pretend it's something else, but those macroeconomic numbers are demonstrating time and time again that there is a desperation out there. And we're in another world. We take 2-week recesses, then we come back and we have morning business and we chat along. That does nothing to resolve the consequential issues facing this nation. There was a time that used to work where you can sit down and solve a problem, but now it's all a facade, few talking points, and we move on. In the meantime, people are suffering, and they're handicapped by our inability to work together, and regulatory reform is central to that agenda. Make no mistake about it. Let's look at what we're talking about, why we need regulatory reform. The analysts have lowered their forecast for the second quarter growth this year. The first quarter growth was already abysmal at 1.8% of GDP. Manufacturing recovery has slowed. Housing remains in shambles with the new numbers that are out. New claims for jobless benefits, as the senator from North Dakota indicated, exceeds 400,000 again. Growth of consumer spending is sluggish. Now, the president talks about job creation and stimulating the economy, but results speak louder than words. Since the president took office, unemployment has dipped below 9% for only 5 months. And even that data is skewed because it doesn't account for the millions of workers who have exited the workforce altogether. Just last week, the unemployment rate for May increased to 9.1%. We are experiencing the longest unemployment period in American history since data collection started in 1948, surpassing even the 1982 double-dip recession for the length of unemployment. Now, despite the president's promise, an $800 billion stimulus package, a $700 billion TOP program, up to $600 billion in quantitative easing by the Federal Reserve, over $2 trillion in overall government spending, we are years away from where we need to be in terms of job or economic growth. 40 months, Mr. President. 40 months. 40 months. Imagine that. After the start of the 4 deepest post-war recessions, our economic output averaged 7.6% higher than pre-recession levels. Yet since December 2007, when the most recent recession commenced, our GDP has only increased 0.1%. That's why we need regulatory reform, Mr. President. That's why we need it. We need to bolster job creation. And the only place where you can do that is through small businesses. And I know firsthand. Now, the senator from California says, well, we need hearings on this amendment. Then we should change the rules of the United States Senate and require every amendment that's offered on this floor has to have a hearing. Every bill. That must be a new standard, Mr. President, because obviously there is no fundamental understanding of what is taking place. We have had hearings on this question in the Small Business Committee, and the focus is that we desperately need reform. We heard in November 2010 in a small business regulatory reform hearing, a witness noticed if there was a 30% cut in regulatory costs, an average 10-person firm would save nearly $32,000, enough to hire 1 additional person. When President Reagan entered office in 1981, he faced actually much worse economic problems than President Obama faced in 2009. 3 worsening recessions starting in 1969 were about to culminate in the worst of all in 1981 and 1982, and I know I served in the U.S. House of Representatives at that moment in time, with unemployment soaring into double digits at a peak of 10.8%. Huge chunks of industrial America shut down, never reopened. Yet once the recovery began in earnest in the first quarter of 1983, the economy boomed, exceeded 7.1% for 5 consecutive quarters. It kept growing at 4% pace for another 2 years. The contrast in results between the current recovery and the Reagan years is instructive because the policy mix was so different. In the 1980s, the policy goals were to cut tax rates, reduce regulatory costs, and uncertainty, which is what these regulations are producing day in and day out. Let the private economy allocate capital free of political direction and focus monetary policy and price stability rather than on reducing unemployment. This is the type of policy mix that we need to rediscover if we are going to climb out of this economic downturn. Now let's look at the first chart, small business job creators in my state and across America, because they're the ones that create 70% of all the net new jobs in America. That's why regulations becomes so essential and an imperative. The total cost of regulations is $1.7 trillion. That's with a T. $1 trillion. And small firms with fewer than 20 employees bear a disproportionate burden in terms of those costs. It's $10,585 per employee, which is 36% higher than the regulatory costs confronting larger firms. Now, I know some people like to dispute numbers and say, well, no, that's not really a true number. Oh, really? Just add them up. Just add them up. There was a study that was done by Crane and Crane. They added the estimated cost of 4 categories or types of regulations. Economic regulations, $1.2 trillion. Environmental regulations, $281 billion. Tax compliance, $160 billion. Regulations involving occupational safety, health, and homeland security, $75 billion. Now, some studies omit independent agencies, like, even omit the Internal Revenue Service from the calculation of the cost of regulations. Well, you ask a small business or any business in America about that the IRS doesn't cost in terms of regulations. Of course they do. You have to include all agencies of government that have an impact directly on small business or any business in America. The point is, Mr. President, the principal impediment to job creation in this country is a broken regulatory system. We have repeatedly talked about it. It is a top priority for small business community across America. Every major organization that is a key voice for small businesses echoes this repeatedly. Federal regulations has placed a tremendous burden. Now, I know my colleagues and I understand, some of us understand the critical nature of all this. We've heard the message loud and clear. And even the President, interestingly enough, started issuing an executive order in January to begin the process of reviewing federal regulations, citing the need, and I quote, absurd and unnecessary paperwork requirements that waste time and money. So in 4 months, the administration's preliminary findings uncovered over $1 billion in savings to 30 agencies. And, they ran the gamut. They included even environmental regulations. So obviously, there's some recognition and acknowledgement that regulations are a barrier and an impediment. I mean, one of the proposals that the President's eliminating by the Environmental Protection Agency, so I don't think that anybody would suggest he's trying to eradicate all environmental protections in America by identifying some that just aren't worthy of support because they are onerous, would eliminate the requirement that states install a system to protect against fuel polluting the air at gas stations, since modern vehicles already have these systems. That would save up to $67 million a year. So no one's going to accuse the President of sort of saying, well, we're undermining all environmental regulations in the country. It's as if we can't be discerning and discriminating and evaluating what's worthy and what isn't, what's too costly and complex and what isn't, what makes sense and what doesn't in this current context of this economic environment. Can we spend time doing that? Since the time I was denied on May 4th an ability to vote on this amendment, could we have worked that out? Absolutely not. So why can't we become involved in this effort? It seems we're turning a blind eye to it. No recognition, because I don't think there's a full understanding or appreciation but what is going awry in the economic landscape in every community across this country, and why there is that despair, that anxiety. And, oh, by the way, about 80% of the American people believe we're moving the wrong direction when it comes to our economy. That should be a Paul Revere wake-up call. There should be a message that we might want to recalibrate our focus here in the United States Senate, maybe spend some time here in the United States Senate working out the issues to solve the problems so we can create jobs for Americans who are unemployed, because we know that 9.1% doesn't capture all unemployed Americans. There are many who just have dropped out entirely. You could have as many as underemployed or unemployed up to 25 million Americans, Mr. President. That is staggering. That is breathtaking. Now, at the time I was denied a vote, the last time that we could have been moving ahead on this legislation, or in the interim, when I was denied that vote on May 4th, working out another solution to work through these issues, the chairman of President Obama's own Council on Jobs and Competitiveness, the General Electric CEO, Jeff Immelt, announced the top 4 priorities. This just happened in May 10th, I think. Yeah, May 10th. Just when, understand, May 4th, they said, oh, you can't do regulatory reform. That's, you know, preposterous. We haven't had hearings. If hearings matter, by the way, hearings that sometimes are path to nowhere. Nothing leads from anything. But let's say, well, we'll take that time to do something since then. Have there been hearings called for? No. Of course not. But 6 days later, who's speaking on regulatory reform? The President's own Council on Jobs and Competitiveness. That's who. And he's noting a number of priorities. And guess what? One of them happens to be regulations. And it says, to support a pro-growth environment and strengthen U.S. competitiveness, he listed focusing on small business, right? Improving and innovating education, bolstering exports to the world's fastest-growing markets. There's 3 of those priorities. And then he called for, and I quote, collaboration between government and business with regard to regulation as a top priority, noting that decades of overlapping, uncoordinated regulations create unnecessary hurdles, increases burdens for entrepreneurs and businesses, large and small, across the country, end quote. Let me repeat. This is from the President's hand-selected chairman of a council dedicated to create American jobs and boosting our competitiveness. And now he made this pronouncement less than a week, as I said, after the Senate failed to consider my regulatory reform amendment. That was nearly 2 months ago, when we just had a mere 3 days of votes over that time. So you might think, well, okay, there were some reasonable concerns about my amendment. What have we done since then? Nothing. 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 We might have had a recess, too. We had days without votes, days without debating key issues. Actually, not just days, weeks. Nothing. Nothing. It's nothing's connecting. You know? What's connecting, though, unfortunately, for small businesses and people who depend on small businesses for jobs, is that there's a cause and effect. And that's why you're seeing the deleterious effects of our inability to work on the issues that matter. That we have just basically relegated all of this to the back seat. You know, we've subjugated for other things without purpose. It truly is regrettable because of what it is doing to the average American and for those who are struggling. And people rightfully know it. American people understand what's happening here, or what isn't happening here, I should say. The breadth of regulations is truly punitive on businesses in America. The Heritage Foundation reported last year that the burden of regulation on Americans increased at an alarming rate in fiscal year 2010, with a record 43 major new regulations costing $26.5 billion alone, far more than any other year for which records are available. That's just in 1 year, $26.5 billion. That's on top of the $1.75 trillion in annual regulatory costs. That's just 1 year, $26.5 billion. I mean, it's clear that the administration and the agencies have gone on a regulatory rampage. So again, it's that detachment from the real world and what this means. What are the real practical implications for the person running a small business and trying to calculate the costs or anticipate future costs? So why are they going to hire new employees and take on new costs? Why are they going to make investments? They don't dare. They can't take the risk. They say, we don't know. I meet with small businesses regularly. I talk to them. And they keep saying it's the uncertainty, the regulations. Well, this demonstrates it. Just in 2010 alone. Now, the Heritage Foundation said, regulatory costs will rise until policymakers appreciate the burdens that regulations are imposing on Americans and the economy and exercise the political will necessary to limit and reduce those burdens. Well, that's exactly what our amendment will do. This is a clarion call, you know, for regulatory reform. There should know no political, philosophical boundaries. There shouldn't be philosophical differences. Now, you might have some arguments about, well, what approach you take, but those things can be worked out. In fact, that's exactly what I did with the amendment that I offered, that I was denied a vote on back May 4th. From the other side, there were some issues, and we made 5 major modifications to my proposal because it is important to build bipartisan support. I've certainly reached across the aisle on so many occasions, so I would have thought that we could have had a corresponding response to work out these issues. That's what I don't understand. I cannot understand. There shouldn't be any debate. They talk to their small business community, they'll get the same response. So what can we do to make it better? And that's the key. The key is making some changes. Now, you know, one, I call for small business review panels to be attached to every agency so that they review the regulations before they're promulgated, before they're implemented. So we find out beforehand what might be of concern to small business, what might have potential costs or risk or won't work out. Know it beforehand. I hear from someone say, oh, no, well, we'll work it out later, afterwards. Well, you ask the small business person, you know, how are you going to work that out afterwards after they've paid, you know, astronomical costs to comply with that regulation. So let's set up these small business review panels. And this isn't a new model. This isn't a new model. There are such panels to OSHA and EPA, and I offered it to the Financial Regulatory Reform Bill, to the Consumer Protection Financial Bureau, and it's part of that mechanism now. So there was a model that we adopted from OSHA and EPA from 1996 when we had a Democratic administration. It's worked exceptionally well. So I thought, well, why not apply it to every agency? Well, absolutely not. So I said, okay, what can we do to work it out? So I talked on the other side of the aisle. We changed it. We said, for the 3 years that this bill will be authorized, we'll do it, you know, for 9 agencies, 3 a year, to see how it works. The 9 biggest agencies that have the most effect on small businesses. So I did that. I made that change because I thought, you know, we'll try it out, okay, and to address the concerns that were expressed on the other side of the aisle. And so then we said we should start requiring the agency to do what they are supposed to do by law. So, you know, you think it's a little redundant to ask them to do what they're required to do already, which is to review the rules. They're supposed to review the rules every 10 years, but guess what? They don't. They don't. So I said, well, if they're not reviewing these rules every 10 years, then they couldn't be that important. So let's take them off the books. That's what I said. That's what I had proposed. If an agency can't be bothered to review the regulations as they're required to do under law every 10 years, and they're not doing it, then they must not be that important. Let's take them off. So there was some resistance on the other side, so I made the change in response to the concerns. And what I incorporated is that they would lose 1% of their operating budget. That's fair. We have to give them incentive to do what they should be doing by law, but we'll now give them some greater impetus to comply with the law. It is amazing that we're in that position, but that's where it stands. And so I made that change because I thought that it was important. We have inspector generals. They're tasked with ensuring that these reviews are taking place, and they can do so in consultation with the Chief Advocacy Council and the Small Business Administration. It's not unusual for an IG to determine whether the agency that they oversee is complying with existing laws. After all, isn't that what they precisely do? Would anybody argue that outdated and ineffective regulations hurt the environment or harm small businesses? You know, the administration's own preliminary review of regulations at 30 agencies in 4 months identified $1 billion worth of savings. Why wouldn't we want to start those reviews to become the norm rather than the exception? I just don't understand it. Are we that busy here that we can't do it? Maybe we could forfeit a few recesses and do some work for America. So to connect with what's going on Main Street, getting back to Main Street, because that's where the jobs are created. Maybe we could spend more time here doing that instead of deferring sometime down the road, perhaps, maybe, all those ambiguous phrases that, again, lead to no practical outcome or result. Well, you know, so I made some other key changes in hopes that we could build that bridge in response to the concerns that were given the other side. I made 5 major modifications because I thought it was important to build the bipartisan support. But again, I was denied that opportunity. So now we're saying, well, it hasn't had a hearing. Well, I think we ought to change the rules of the Senate, Mr. President, as I said earlier. Then they'll require for every amendment. Perhaps that would slow the train down someplace here. And maybe we could get back to achieving some real results. Now, another provision that I have in my Regulatory Reform Act that I've introduced with Senator Coburn and so many others here, it's a basic common sense approach, but it might not work for some here, I'm sure, incorporating the indirect economic effects of of regulations on small businesses so that we make sure that they anticipate the foreseeable indirect economic effects in addition to the direct effects, because we know there are a multiplicity of effects that resonate and reverberate with other industries, and that needs to be calculated and incorporated and factored into the equation in terms of cost. Now, I also recommend that we expand the judicial review requirements so that we make sure that small businesses have the opportunity to at least make sure that the agency considers issuing a rule that has a significant economic impact on a substantial number of small businesses, that it must publish that with the proposed rule. That the agency has considered the impact the rule will have on small businesses, that has contemplated less costly alternative ways to make the rule less burdensome. That's important because they ought to listen to a diverse options in terms of the rule that they're proposing to make sure they've incorporated the views of small businesses and understanding the implications, being more exact and precise in the process, not waiting until months and years down the road after you go through a very extensive, complicated rulemaking process to try to make your case small businesses don't have the resources to do that to begin with, let alone the time or employees to do it. And that isn't a good use of their capital, by the way, to be spending their time arguing with a government agency, you know, time and again. For 30 years, small businesses have had the ability to seek judicial review of agencies' small business impact statement after the rule has been made. And in this entire time period, Mr. President, for over 30 years, even with the ability to obtain judicial review, we know of only 2 rules that were remanded by the courts. One was a mining regulation that did not account for the number of small businesses that had gone bankrupt under bonding requirements. The other was fishing restrictions issued without realizing the impact on fishermen. So what this means is that waiting until the rule is final is simply too late. The damage is done, Mr. President. So to correct this injustice, our amendment would provide small businesses the ability to bring legal action earlier in the process so we can avert mistakes at the outset, so we don't force small businesses to go through this onerous, complex, and then find out, whoops, we made a mistake, the agencies made a mistake. And they said, well, then, you know what, you're going to have to fight it, and you have to go through another rulemaking process, which takes months, if not years. It's just not going to happen. That's why we're not stimulating economic growth, because we get thousands of regulations. So as a result, we have provided small businesses the ability to bring legal action, to seek judicial review prior to the rule becoming finalized, so whether an agency failed to comply with its existing small business review requirement. This is a common-sense approach, Mr. President, to ensure agencies abide by the law prior to a rule being made final. It's not a partisan measure. It's just practical sense. Now, if somebody hasn't run a small business, they probably don't understand it, don't appreciate what it takes, you know, to start or run a small business, the ingenuity and the cost involved. You know, if you get a small operation with 5 employees, 10 employees, and 20 employees, those are most of small business America, but they add up. It's that 70% of all the net new jobs in America come from small businesses, 9.1% unemployment. Remember, in the last 2.5 years, other than 4 months, we've had 9% or higher unemployment rates, Mr. President. I mean, that's a dire commentary of where we stand today after we have spent $2 trillion. $2 trillion, and the deficit is growing, the debt's growing. We're facing, you know, the potential, you know, of a debt crisis if we don't deal with this massive accumulation of debt. That's why job growth becomes such an imperative. That's why regulatory reform, you know, is urgent. And that's why we could do something about it. We could work across the aisle instead of making broad accusations. This is going to decimate the environment. This is going to decimate workplace safety. This is going to decimate health care. If that's the case, then the President must be doing the same thing, because he's just revoked more than $1 billion worth of regulations from agencies in 4 months. We can't even have a hearing in 4 months on the issue if hearings are so important to the outcome. I'd be more than happy to have hearings to get it done, but we can't even get hearings. Can't work it out. It's just talk, 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 Mr. President. You know, and some of my proposals had bipartisan support. In fact, you know, interestingly enough, Mr. President, this proposal regarding judicial review was a provision that actually the Small Business Committee chair, the senator from Louisiana, proposed, and Senator Cardin from Maryland, a nearly identical provision as Section 605 of the Small Business Investment and Innovation Act of 2010 in the 111th Congress. So they obviously agreed with the approach. So it's nothing partisan about this. We ought to be able to work this out. There's nothing complicated about it. There's nothing complicated about addressing a fundamental issue facing small business. I just want to get it straight, because it's clear it's not understood. We're just making some generalized characterizations about something about which people haven't read the amendment, don't understand it, can't sort of reason it out, and even if you disagreed, coming up with something so we can move with urgency, with dispatch, because we're losing jobs in America. We're losing businesses. This would help enormously. That's why my legislation that I've introduced in the Senator from Oklahoma and others has broad support from every major small business organization in America, because they understand. They're hearing from their membership. Our amendment includes a number of provisions, that would be important that I've mentioned. We ask the Internal Revenue Service to consider small business impact when rulemaking, and that agencies regularly review their rules penalty structures. I think we should ask the Internal Revenue Service to consider small business impact as well. It's reasonable. They obviously have broad effect on small businesses across America. Well, Mr. President, I've spoken on this issue at great length because I think it's that important. I'm ranking member of the Small Business Committee. I've been chair of the Small Business Committee. And since 2003, in either capacity. My state of Maine is a small business state, more than 90% of small businesses. So I fully understand and appreciate the magnitude of the situation, the circumstances in which they find themselves and struggling to survive. That's why on the interchange fee that I supported yesterday was important to small business and retailers and merchants, absolutely. It's an important issue that consumed a lot of time here in the Senate, both this year and last year, as it should. I certainly didn't complain. I didn't complain because I understand that. It didn't have a hearing, a new proposal. It didn't have any hearing. I didn't complain, But it's important to understand. I just want everybody to understand, not every amendment that's offered here on the floor, every proposal has a hearing. In fact, far from it. Very few ever do. And then so what with hearings? We had a hearing on small business regulations last fall. That's why I'm working this out. But we can't work it out. There's no process and mechanism. It's all talk. No action for where it matters most. And I feel the despair and the anxiety of my constituents. I feel it intuitively. I wish we could do better. I've been in the legislative process, as I said earlier, a better part of 4 decades. And my whole reason for serving in public office is to rise to a higher level. I believe it's my responsibility to solve problems, Mr. President, on behalf of the people I represent and hopefully the country. There are only 100 United States senators. It matters for our states and it matters for our country. I would hope that we could aspire to a higher level than this. And certainly in the aftermath of the last election, where there was an indisputable, unequivocal message from the American people, begging and pleading with us to solve problems. We have an individual and we have a collective responsibility. We know how to do it, and we can do it. The genius of America has always been to working together to solve our problems. That has been the hallmark of the innovation and the stick-to-itiveness and the can-do spirit of America. I happen to believe in that can-do spirit. And I know it's possible. If we have a process and a procedure here in the United States Senate that allowed for it, When I get up every day, Mr. President, it's about what I can do for the people I represent and for this country at a very trying and anguishing moment where the uncertainty is permeating the American psyche. To feel and to understand the fear that people get up with every day wondering if they're going to find a job or keep a job. And even if they get a job, it's about a third of what they were making before. I heard that story yesterday from some constituents. And the hundreds who came in to apply for a job, you know, for a third of what they're making. How are they going to keep afloat their families, their home, if they can keep it? That's what it's all about. And why isn't it we can't replicate it here in the actions, in speaking to the American people and to give voice to those fears and say, we're going to do it, Mr. President, that we're going to do it right here and systematically tackle those issues one after the other and just do it and do it as long as it takes. If we have to work weekends, because Americans are working weekends, 2 and 3 jobs. They're doing everything. We take recesses. We do this. We obfuscate. The word that comes to mind, sort of create a confusion, a masquerade, oh, we're doing something, just, you know, to mix it up. But the practical impact and the absence of what we're doing is directly felt at home on the average American. I know we can do better, Mr. President. There have been soaring moments in this chamber, and there can be again. This is one of the most consequential times in our economic history. And we have an obligation to lift the spirits of the people up by working together on the issues that matter. And this is one issue that matters, because there are 30 million small businesses in America. They're the job generators and creators. And if we don't recognize the reality of this type of reform and we can't get it done, then we have failed to do our jobs. And I regret that, because I believe differently we can do it. And working it out instead of talking about hearings at some point, some ambiguity, as if we can't appreciate or understand what's happening in the real world in households every day and on Main Streets. And if you don't, then I suggest you take a few Main Street tours and talk to small businesses and talk to their fears. And these are Americans who are working mightily hard to make a difference in this world. And all they want is a better life for themselves and their family and their children. And in fact, we're retreating. We have an obligation to stand up and to do what's right. I hope we can find our way somehow, somewhere. And this is a great place to start to make a difference. I yield the floor, Mr. President.
Senator from California.